When Paolo Maldini was fired for giving this interview to CBS Sports, where he asked the club owners to be brave and spend more money, none of us thought that by the middle of the Mercato, Milan would have spent 100 million euros. Halfway through the Mercato, AC Milan are the highest spenders in all of Serie A. They have now spent 110 million euros. A player that went from being the laughing stock to Milan fans to a centerpiece of Milan's midfield reportedly wants out of AC Milan, as Rade Krunić agrees personal terms for a departure to Fenerbache. And there's some reports that the player that Milan want to replace Krunic with is Atalanta's Koopmeiners. The Athletic highlights how Samuel Chukwueze is the second best dribbler in all of La Liga. And this graph by The Athletic made me want to bring back Plot the Official Moves. Basically a university stats class where we determine the level of importance of Milan's latest signings, including the latest arrival of Yunus Musa, while Milan get ready to table their first offer for Argentinian striker Alejo Veliz. And these are some of the profiles that we're going to be looking at in today's episode of Rumor or Real. And let's kick it off with the profile we looked at in the last video. Alejo Véliz of Argentina plays for Rosario there. The player is a 19-year-old striker, scored multiple goals in the Under-20 World Cup, impressed Moncada and Furlani and those guys there. He's also had over 10 goals for Rosario during their season. So this player seems to be scoring at the high levels. And as pointed out in his scouting report, Véliz seems to be a bit more of an old school striker. He's more of a poacher, probably a little bit more in line with Olivier Giroud than he might be like Okafor, which is important for the versatility of Milan's squad. It does seem like Olivier Giroud, this could be his last season at the club, and Milan sees the Argentinian player, who also holds a European passport, as a player who would be a good quality replacement for Olivier Giroud. And keep in mind all the information and all the knowledge that he can probably soak up from Giroud during the course of the season. Now, there have been some reports that Torino have already made an offer for the player. Nottingham Forest seems to be involved as well. And the club, the rossoneri management, did meet with the player's agent, and there are some reports that are suggesting that his agent didn't actually leave. He's planning on staying in Italy until this whole situation is resolved. And according to Gianluca Di Marzio, one of the most reliable journalists in Italy, Milan will be tabling their first offer for this player. He does have, I believe, a release clause around the 14-15 million mark, but Milan believe for whatever reason that they can probably strike up a deal around that 12 million mark for the player. There are some suggestions that the reason why they can agree on possibly a 12 million fee is because Milan might buy this player and then loan him back to the Argentinian side while holding on to Colombo at the club. That makes it somewhat beneficial for Rosario as well, because they'll get to hold on to the player till December. And on the rumor real meter, the Alejo Véliz move, I think with the departure of Ante Rebic and the possible departure of Divock Origi, there's no doubt that Milan's going to be looking to sign a striker. And from the looks of it, as we've discussed multiple times, the profile, the young profile, this player seems like it's a possible move. I think this can absolutely happen. And as always, if a player has to come in, very good chance a player has to go out. And looks like this time it's going to be Divock Origi, a move that just hasn't worked out. Sign him as a free agent, scored 2 goals the entire season, definitely hasn't convinced Stefano Pioli. According to Daniele Longo, Milan is negotiating with 3 or 4 Saudi clubs. If they do a deal for this player, it's going to be probably around that 10 million mark, which to me sounds kind of low. I mean, Saudi clubs are willing to spend a lot of money. However, they seem to be offering him a starting role at the clubs wherever he's negotiating. But because the player was signed by Milan as a free agent, it's going to be a decent bit of capital gains for the club's books. However, the one spot that Milan's going to get a little bit of hurt is they're going to have to pay a penalty. Because Origi's a foreign player, the club, Italian clubs, what they do is they use something called the growth decree tax benefit. So Origi's net salary, the one that he took home, was around 4 million, but the gross salary that Milan actually paid out was closer to 5.4 million. But that salary amount came up after Milan used the growth decree, which actually allows you to subsidize the player's salary. Without the decree, his salary would have been 7.4 million. Now, this benefit comes with a requirement. The player has to be playing for 2 years for the club. But in Milan's case, if they lose him this summer Mercato, they're going to have to pay that 2 million back. And on the rumor real meter, Divock Origi out of Milan, that's absolutely real. This player has to go. He's just cannot be seen as a part of Pioli's plans for the future. And then there's the latest news about Rade Krunić's departure from the club. Now, as I highlighted, Krunic went from being a player that was completely on the periphery. No fans wanted to see him in the starting 11, and for whatever reason, with Stefano Pioli making some adjustments in the squad, at times playing a 3-man midfield, Krunic started to get a lot more playtime, and he really started to grow on the fans purely because of his good performances. He's played as a central midfielder in a 2-man midfield, in a 3-man midfield. He's played as a central attacking midfielder, at times as a left winger. So he has that versatile football personality to him, who can play in multiple different positions, which also kind of makes him an important player for Stefano Pioli. But Krunic, from the way I would see it, would see Milan signing Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Yunus Musa, Tiani Reinders, pretty much all the players, and then there's also Ismail Benacer in this team, all players that are possibly going to be pushing him lower and lower in the pecking order. So after having seen the team get back in the Champions League, winning a title, he probably feels like his cycle is done and he wants to move somewhere where he's going to get regular playtime. And there's some reports that there have been communication between Fenerbahce and Milan. Apparently the player has already come up with an agreement with the club for a move, but now some of the latest reports are suggesting that Milan actually doesn't want him to go, and the only way they're going to let him go is if they get a big offer for the player. They're not going to agree to a move like Ante Rebic where they let him go for 1.5 million in bonuses. They want a big offer, then they're comfortable letting Krunic go. So Krunic's departure from Milan, I think it's unlikely, guys. I think Pioli really values the player. He has that versatile personality that fills in multiple different positions, and I think he's an important asset to the club, and I'm happy to see that a lot of fans also don't want him gone. The only bright light that kind of came out from this whole report about Krunic's possible departure is the fact that some reports then started to say that Milan is going to be going for Atalanta's Koopmeiners to replace Rade Krunić. An important piece to Atalanta's midfield, scored 10 goals last season, 30 plus appearances, a player that I heard some people say would be on their team of the year for last season. So that improvement of replacing Rade Krunić with a defensive midfielder, a profile we need in Koopmeiners, would be amazing for Milan. However, guys, on the rumor real meter, I just don't think this is possible. I think this is purely just a rumor. First of all, I don't even know if Krunic is going to be leaving. And secondly, Atalanta, we've seen how they sell players. They bought Højlund for 17 million, sold to Manchester United in a year for 70 plus. They extract high numbers for their players. This player probably has an evaluation north of 30 to 40 million, and I just can't see the rossoneri management spending that much money after all the spending for this mercato on a single player. Now let's plot 3 of Milan's latest moves in this mercato. So there are basically 4 sections to this graph. Ideally, you want to be somewhere over here. These are important moves that push us to the next title. If a player plays somewhere over here, it's not much of an important move, but it possibly does push us towards the next title. A move placed on the left side of this graph is probably not an ideal one for the club, and we'll kick it off with the signing of Samuel Chukwueze. For me, guys, I'm gonna put Chukwueze's signing somewhere over here. This is an important part to Milan's attack. This is a role that we've been depleted in for years, and if we look at this graph by The Athletic, Chukwueze is one of the best one-on-one dribblers in all of La Liga. Now you can see Vinicius Jr. is all the way over there. He does make about 10 attempts, but his success rate was somewhat lower. Chukwueze's attempts would be a little bit lower, but his success rate was second best in the entire league. And that is sort of what Milan has been looking for. They need an attacking right winger. The entirety of last season and past couple seasons, our attack has been left side minded. It's just Theo Hernandez connecting with Rafael Leao, connecting with Olivier Giroud. We had an essential hole on the right flank. And the fact that Samuel Chukwueze, a player that was being courted by Real Madrid and led this Villarreal team to a European trophy, tells you the quality and level of this player. So for me, this is a highly important move that certainly pushes us towards our next trophy. And then there's the departure of Ante Rebic. I'm gonna have to put that somewhere over here. I think it's a little bit less important a departure. The sad part is it doesn't get the clubs a lot of funds. If he got the club around 10 million, I would have probably put him a little bit higher. I don't think this departure makes the team necessarily much better. I think the one element that has to be pointed out, that I have pointed out in the last couple of videos, he was becoming a problem for Stefano Pioli. There were issues around Ante Rebic's behavior in this team, and the fact that he's not here might eliminate that unnecessary distraction. And then there's a signing of Yunus Musa. Now, in level of its importance, I think a lot of people have been somewhat critical of Milan's management of the impending signing of Yunus Musa to the club, because they feel like the profile that the club actually needed was a holding midfielder, somewhat of a defensive presence, but they've signed another player who has somewhat of an attacking mindset. So in terms of its importance, I think his inclusion to this team is a little bit lower. But at the same time, I think it does push us to our next trophy, and mostly because it's going to offer the team some depth. If we look at the Champions League semifinal that Milan played against Inter, when a player got injured, the first injury to Milan's squad to Ismail Benacer, and the replacement was Junior Messias. Now, having this much depth in the midfield, I think it is a move that will help Milan in terms of its importance and could push the team to their next trophy. Now, you guys let me know in the comment section, what do you think about Yunus Musa's move? And do you think this was the right profile for Milan to sign? And then there is the ongoing situation of Divock Origi's Belgian teammate in Charles De Ketelaere. So no matter what Charles De Ketelaere seems to be doing in training or in the US tour, it just just doesn't seem to be convincing Stefano Pioli. While at the same time, he himself wants to convince the coach. He does not want to leave. He wants to prove himself here. However, from the looks of it, a couple options do seem to have opened up. Apparently, he's rejected a loan move to PSV. He doesn't want to move there. Milan was attempting to set him out on loan, get him some playing minutes, get some goals and assists, increase his value, and hopefully be able to sell him and not get a capital loss. And in order to avoid a capital loss, at this point in time, if Milan were to sell him this mercato, they have to at least sell him for 28 million. And that's going to be a tough ask. The only two teams that I'm reading about that would take up CDK are, first, it's Lens from Ligue 1. With the sale of Openda, a player that was linked with Milan, the sale of Fofana, I believe the club has raised about 80 to 85 million. So they're one of the clubs that could possibly meet Milan's price tag of 28 million. The other team that's being linked with CDK is Atalanta, a team that just lost their attacker Højlund to Manchester United. So there's another club missing an attacker and has the funds to be able to pay for CDK. But as of right now, Charles De Ketelaere away from Milan, I feel like it is unlikely. And the only reason I feel that is because he just doesn't seem to want to leave. And I think the player's will to push to stay and the possible departure of Yacine Adli, maybe Milan would hold on to him for depth. But closer to the end of the transfer window, I can see some offers maybe coming in last minute that tempt Milan, they convince them, and CDK goes. There you have it, guys. Those are some of the profiles I wanted to look at today in Rumor or Real. Plotting the official moves, looks like Milan has had a ridiculously busy mercato and it doesn't seem to be changing whatsoever. We're now in August, just a few weeks away from kicking off the season, and from the looks of it, Milan will be making another 3 to 4 more signings. Now, you guys let me know in the comment section, how do you feel about Milan's mercato? And tell me your top position, your number one position that you think Milan needs to fill in. And if you haven't already, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you can watch these videos as soon as I upload them. And as always, Forza Milan, grazie mille e ciao tutti!